All right. Hello, everyone. So excited to have this conversation. We're on a different format today because technology is a great thing. So you'll notice if you are a podcast follower of ours that we look a little bit different this time around, but we're flexible with what we do and how we do it. So we're super excited to have this conversation, and we were not going to let anything stop us from having it. So today on our podcast, we have Ed Cunningham. And Ed is actually someone I met on my time with The Blocks, which was the reality show that I've talked a little bit about. It was filmed in January earlier this year. It was just released a little over a month ago, and we're really just diving right in. And I had some great conversations with Ed. And then scrolling through, we've stayed in contact, scrolling through social media, I found out that Ed is actually running for mayor of his local city. So, Ed, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you're here to talk about today, and we'll dive right in.
Well, first off, thanks for having me. I love being able to have conversations, especially when uh, it's conversations that have to be had. You know, one of the reasons why we have so much division right now in our country is not because we have differences of opinions. It's because people take such a hard stance. They take such a strong position that they create the opposition of anyone that thinks or looks at things differently. And one of the most beautiful parts about America is that we are diverse. You know, we're one of the few countries on earth that was made up of everyone else on the planet coming here to try and have a better life. And that's what made us strong, is when we accepted people being different and stopped trying to make everybody conform to what our view should be. You know, that's one of the things about running for mayor. You know, I've always been one of those that's kind of behind the scenes, you know, with the businesses that I've built and run, the philanthropy work that I've done. I've kind of enjoyed a little bit of anonymity with that here in Surprise, Arizona, kind of being in the background. And it's been nice because I'm not that spotlight kind of person, but with some of the ugliness that is just out there and has inundated our politics, I couldn't sit by any longer and not be involved. And it actually came from when I was in the military. My dad would write me a letter, usually once a month. At the top of every letter, there'd be a quote. And one of the quotes that always stuck with me was by, I believe it was Edmund Burke, but it said, "All evil needs to succeed is for good men to do nothing." And I was having lunch with our current mayor a couple of years ago, and, you know, he had said, "Hey, I'm not going to run anymore. And your name keeps coming up as someone we'd like to step up." And I'm like, you know, I hate politicians. I hate politics. It's not something I really want to be in. And he goes, "Well, you know, Ed, the problem is the good people just want to quietly enjoy their lives, and the people that want to do harm are the ones that are choosing to step up." And he goes, "So if you just do nothing, those people get to do what they want." And I went, crap, like that is exactly what my dad had sent me all those years ago. We do have to have good people on all sides to step up and actually come together. And so I threw my hat in the ring, and sure enough, the ugly side comes out, but you just got to chuckle and learn not to take things personally.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about Surprise, Arizona. What is it that makes Surprise special, and what do you hope happens as a result of this election?
So we are the furthest northwest city in the what we call the Valley of the Sun, or, you know, kind of the outskirts of Phoenix. We are the furthest northwest. We are a booming city. We used to just be a gas station on the way to Vegas, and now we're up over 200,000 residents, and we're expected
Wow.
to double that in the next 6 to 10 years. And yeah, we're booming. So there's so much going on here. Again, another reason that I was excited to step up into the ring. And that's actually what I went to the Blocks for, was to talk
Mhm.
about the new venue that I was planning on bringing here to Surprise. And luckily enough, I got to meet you.
Wonderful. Yeah, it was great. And I know one of the very first conversations we had was we would sit together at meals and people would start with, "So what do you do?" And I actually introduced with, "Well, I'm the owner of a consulting firm that focuses on social justice." And the initial response is typically, "Oh," or, "Well, what does that do?" Right? So it's the two very different responses. And your response was, "So how do you do that?" Because I think so many people, when they perceive or when they hear social justice work, they think about what society sees, which is very divisive and very polarizing. And that's what started our conversation of how us squared is different, where we don't polarize. We believe that the only way to truly address social justice is if everyone is seen, heard, welcomed, and valued. And that means that we all need to listen to different perspectives, even if they're different from our own. And that someone's lived experience does not negate someone else's lived experience. It's simply different lived experiences because of who we are and what we have in our lives. And you shared a story around the Black Lives Matter movement and Blue Lives Matter and a rally that was held in Surprise.
Yep.
And I'd love for you to share that with our listeners because it was a very powerful kind of start to our relationship.
Okay. Yeah, this was, it's funny because most of these things, again, I'm the kind of guy that I like to live my life. I really don't want to be bugged. I don't want to, but when I see something that's about to affect a lot of people, like I can't stand bullies. I can't stand, people who are just out there trying to force things down other people's throats. And since I was a kid, I've always been that one. When I saw someone getting picked on, I'm the first one there. I'm the guy that beat up the bullies in high school. And so I started seeing these things pop up on social media around the Surprise area, and it was some college kids saying, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. We're going to be holding a protest on this corner of, it was Litchfield and Bell, and that's where my restaurant was. I owned a Firehouse Subs here in Surprise. And so I reached out, and I said, hey, brother, just wanted to reach out. You have it's your constitutional right to be able to protest and to be heard. I just want to make sure it doesn't get violent like it has in other cities because, my family's there, my employees are there, my restaurant's right there. And his reply was, F you, if it's got to get violent, it's going to effing get violent for us to be heard. And I said, okay, cool. I said, just so you know, I do have some friends that will be armed that'll be sitting outside the restaurant. And I want to come over and talk to you and just say hi while you guys are setting up. And so I threw it out there on social media. I said, hey, just so everybody knows, this is going to be going on this weekend, blah, blah, blah. I walk over to where right when they first started setting up, I walked over to the corner and this black kid steps right in front of me and he's like, go back to your people. And I just kind of chuckled and I pushed him aside and I walked back to where the organizers were. And there was a lady and a couple men back there that were setting up tables. And, I explained, I said, hey, my name's Ed Cunningham. I own the Firehouse Subs across the street. I just wanted to make sure, everything goes good tonight and see what I can do to make sure that, everybody, it's peaceful. And what happened was an hour and a half conversation that was absolutely fantastic. And to be honest with you, both sides, the Blue Lives Matter people on one corner and the Black Lives Matter people, the majority of the people there were just having their signs up and were having conversations with each other and whatnot. And there was about 4 people on both sides that seemed to be instigators. It was the weirdest thing. So like I'm standing there talking to the lady that was organizing the Black Lives Matter. And I said, who are those people? And there was these 4 guys in hoods who were walking in and out of the people and just saying things. And then, or they would walk to this side of the crowd and then they would yell something derogatory across to the Blue Lives Matter crew. And it was just, and she goes, I have no idea who they are. They're not part of our group. And I said, all right, well, keep an eye on them because they're trying to stir stuff up. And she was like, absolutely. And so after about an hour and a half of us talking, getting to know each other, we exchanged numbers. I went to walk across the street to where the Blue Lives Matter were. And this lady steps right in front of me, probably in her late 60s, early 70s, and goes, go back to your people, almost word for word what that kid had said. And I said, lady, what are you talking about? And the lady next to her goes, this is Ed Cunningham. This is the Firehouse Subs guy. He's the one that put it out on social media that this was going on. And she goes, well, what the hell were you doing over there? And I said, I was building bridges. And she goes, well, they're the problem. But I go, no, you're the problem. People like you on both sides are the problem. The fact that you don't want to build bridges, the fact that you're so stuck in how you want to see things. And even if you are absolutely right in how you see things and someone else is dead wrong, it is still their right to stay that way. The idea that we should force, coerce, bully, or even legislate other people to think a certain way is just, it's first off, it's a waste of time and a waste of energy. And it's never going to work. And there's no reason for it. So the next week, the chief of police called me up and he said, hey, Ed, would you mind if you put 2 crosswalks between the groups? And I said, yeah, I'll go out there and talk to the groups while they're setting up and I'll make sure there's 2 crosswalks. So we did. And there was some contention still back and forth between the groups, some stuff that was yelled that shouldn't have been. After the second week, me and the head of the Blue Line crew and the head of the Black Lives Matter crew all got together and had lunch. And we met at a Sonic Burger. It was Cotton and Green. We were at the cross streets here in Surprise. And we sat for almost 3 hours. And at first there was a little contention at first because it was, well, you think this, well, you think this. And I said, hold on a second, let's not tell each other what the other person thinks or how they think. Let's ask questions. Let's just talk. After, even a half hour into it, we realized that 90% of how we believed was alike. We care about family. We care about the economy. We believe in, just to being able to live the way we want to live. And as long as it doesn't interfere with someone else's life, we shouldn't have interference from anyone, government or groups or anything. And by the time we left, there were some tears, there was some emotions behind a lot of the conversation, but we all left friends. And the third week of protesting was actually fun. Like we had a dance off. I just randomly and spontaneously popped up that, Black Lives Matter kids, all these college kids, they were blaring some music and doing some dancing. And then the people on the Blue Lives Matter were trying to mimic we're trying to do the same dance moves. And it just went back and forth. We had brought a bunch of subs over to them, sub platters to Black Lives Matter. And this group of probably 6, 7, 8 college kids brought over a bunch of pizzas to the Blue Lives Matter. And they stood there and they said, I know we see things differently, but we're willing to just answer questions. Let's be respectful to each other. They sat there for 45 minutes and answered people's questions. And again, there were hugs, there was tears, there was a coming together. And I don't even think there was a consensus on belief. I don't think anyone agreed that one person was right over the other, but they left without any contention between them. Mm-hmm. And then the protesting ended. And most of the breakdowns that I've helped mediate within my city has been because of lack of understanding. And my grandfather always said, he said, boy, he goes, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. And if you're too busy running this, you're not using these. And that's, I think, the number one way we end the division is if we walk into a room of 100 people and your goal is to see how you can get to know and understand each of those people, and their goal is the same goal, you're going to walk into a room where 100 people want to know who you are and what you're doing. And that's completely the opposite of the way most people operate nowadays. They walk into the room and they want to make all 100 people understand them. And it just doesn't work.
Yeah. It has to be a mutual decision that both people come into a conversation with curiosity and wanting to understand, right? And I think that's something that we talk a lot about with Us Squared is that idea that we don't have to change anyone's mind. The only person that can change anyone's mind is themselves.
Yep.
All we can do is listen and impact people's hearts, and then their hearts can ultimately change their mind if they want to. But our goal in communication can't be to change anyone's mind or to get them to see things our way. It's about listening to understand and trying to just realize that different people have different experiences because of who they are. And there's so much going on right now around politics. And unfortunately, as much as we want to separate politics from social justice issues, they are very combined because there is so much within politics that can really tread into that idea of social justice. What is just, what is not just, what is right, what is not right. And I'm wondering from your perspective, going to politics where you don't like politics, you don't like politicians, and here you are entering into the space. What makes you different from other politicians, or what makes you say, you know what, it is time for me to step into this realm?
I think the biggest thing that makes me different is I am who I am, and I don't really care what other people think of me. I will not change who I am. I will not change what I say, what I do based on becoming popular, based on staying in office, getting in office. I won't, if you watch the progression, it's kind of funny, but you watch the other 2 candidates that are running against me, my message has been consistent, right? Mm-hmm. You watch theirs from their beginning months ago when they first started standing up and speaking. And as it's progressed to today, they've taken things that I have said and put it, like calling themselves bridge builders or using the quotes from my grandpa, which I use in a lot of my stories. And it's funny to watch them, but you've seen them change from what they said the first time to where they are today, because all they're care about, or all they're focused on really, is getting the votes, convincing people to put them in the office. And that's the way a lot of politicians are. Is they're like, I'll say whatever I have to say to get into office, and then I'll do what I want when I get into office. Right. Me, I'm the opposite. I'd rather bare my heart and soul to you, let you know who I am, let you make the best decision, and then accept what that is. And if I'm not and I've had people message me and be like, I really wanted to vote for you, but you're a Republican, and I can't in good conscience vote for a Republican. And my response would be, well, don't look at it as Republican Democrat, because mayor is supposed to be bipartisan. Look at it who's best for the job.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I respect your right to vote that way if that's the way you want to vote. But I'm not out here to win every single person's votes. And as mayor, I'm not going to make everybody happy. I don't. That's not my job. My job is not to make everybody happy. It's to do my best and to give the residents what they want. But I am blunt, and I've said over and over again. I said I'm a flawed man. So if you're expecting this well-oiled politician who's refined, and you're not going to get it. You're not going to get it. I'll make a slip of the tongue. The difference is I'll own it as well. I got no problem owning when I make a mistake and learning from it and moving forward. And it's unfortunate that sets me apart from the politicians, because honestly, that's the way all of us should be. It would be a much better world if we could all be authentic and not take things personally from others.
Absolutely. One thing we talk about a lot is humanizing the conversation around bias in general, because we all have biases. We all have first thoughts. We all have those first impressions. Sometimes they're true, sometimes they're not true, but they're all individualized based on the people that we meet, right? But we all have those, and we have to humanize that conversation. I think you're humanizing the idea of making mistakes, because we all do. And I think everyone knows that we all make mistakes. However, when we get into certain places, maybe politics, maybe a management role, maybe a business owner role, whatever it is, we think that we have to fit this perfect mold, but there is no perfect mold, right? And that's when we fall into that chameleon-like structure of, well, I'm going to say this over here, and I'm going to say this over here, and I'm going to say this over here. But if we just come with our authentic selves and humanize that, yes, we're going to make mistakes. Yes, we have biases. Yes, I am learning every day. And yes, I am failing every day, right? If we can humanize that and be able to talk about it and learn from it, then we'll grow together as a society. And I think that's so critical. When you talk about politics and, saying, I hate politics, I hate politicians, I kind of chuckle because my grandfather was mayor of his city when I was a child. So I remember knowing my grandfather as the mayor, right? And I remember saying, oh, I'm never going into politics. And then probably about 10 years ago, I started to say, that's how we make change at the systems level, is to get into politics. Like, we can make change at the individual level, but just like my wall says, we have to be part of that change. Otherwise, we're part of the problem, right? So we have to be there. And I know that I will be running for political office, but I've made the commitment to my family. My son is still in high school. He just started high school this year. He's young. And I made the commitment to him and to the rest of my family that I would not run for political office until after he's out of school, just because of so many different things that they pull, right? Like you said, I'm a flawed man. I'm a flawed person. All of us are. But I don't want to put that pressure on my child because of things that they pull up or whatever they end up finding. And I'm wondering, what was that shift for you? Was it just, it needs to happen because of the quote that your father wrote to you and then the mayor shared? What was that moment that you said, all right, I'm throwing my hat in the ring?
The biggest moment was when I was having lunch with the current mayor, and it reminded me of the quote my father had said, but it's kind of been percolating there in the background for a long time. Mostly because I already do a lot of the work that a mayor should do, as far as the relationship buildings, the network of business owners / political stuff. I mean, I did a lot of work politically for cancer and the fire service here in Arizona, and even a little bit on the federal level. And so, like you said, when you want to make change at a larger level, you have to step up into the larger arenas. And I started doing that for firefighters with cancer. I've lost some amazing friends that were in the fire service with me to cancer, lost my mom to cancer. And that kind of gave me my first steps up into it, and how I can use my influence and my reputation to be able to make a bigger difference for more people. I considered it here for a while, and it just the ugliness that I would see, I just stayed away from it. But again, if you're going to make a change, you got to be willing to be vulnerable. You got to be willing to throw yourself out there. And so I would have to say it was probably an accumulation of a dozen different moments over the last 10 years that pushed me towards finally making the decision. I was actually backing another candidate for this race for mayor, and he dropped out at the end of January, literally 2 days before I flew out for the blocks. Him and I went and had coffee.
Wow.
And he's like, hey, Just so you know, personal things, I'm dropping out, and your name is the one that keeps coming up. And I said, holy crap. I said, I'm literally flying out to film this reality show. I said, I can't even think about it right now. When I get back, I'll talk to some of my investors and partners to see if I can rearrange my life, because we have to have a full-time mayor. One of the candidates is running saying that he's only going to be a part-time mayor. He could do it on the nights and weekends. We can't. With a city our size, we're not a tiny little town. We have so much going on. And so I actually met with both of the candidates and talked with them about it. And, because I was going to, okay, should I back one of these that are already running? And there's nothing against either of them, because they're actually good people. And I think their hearts are in the right places, but they don't have anywhere near what I have and what I'm bringing to the office as far as my experiences, my network, the stuff I've already been doing for over a decade here in the Valley. And I rearranged my entire life to be able to do it full time. So yeah, again, there wasn't any one moment. My family grew up talking about politics here and there, but they were never overly passionate about it. My mom was kind of a hippie slash kind of leaning towards the liberal side, and my dad was kind of a rocker cowboy that leaned more towards the conservative side. And so I got to watch both sides of it and respect both sides of it. Even though I am registered Republican and I have been for 18 years, I consider myself a constitutional conservative. I believe in small government. I believe in very limited government. I believe the power should be in the hands of the state, like the Constitution was originally written. And, it's funny because I have, some of my friends that sit more on the woke side, more on the way leaning left liberal side, and they're like, no, we need a strong central government, that way we can make the changes happen all across the United States that we want to happen. And I said, well, think about what you're saying. You don't know how many people actually agree with you. So what you're trying to do is, if you centralize power, you can force everyone else. You can try and force everyone else to think the way you want them to think and to do what you want them to do. That only creates contention. It never truly works. That's why all socialist countries end up failing, because you can't force masses to try. It just doesn't ever work. And I said, but think about this. If you are successful in centralizing power, like has happened, that we have a federal government that's completely run amok. It doesn't matter. It only matters who's in charge. Mm-hmm. Once you centralize power like that. So if the left is in charge, then it's going to be all left propaganda and all left stuff. And then what happens when the right takes over? You know what I mean? Which eventually it happens. The pendulum goes back within. It's just one extreme to them, and it destroys societies. When you put the power in the hands of the people, the power in the hands of the states, you get to do what you want, however you want within the state, without a federal government dictating what to do. So if you want to be liberal and you like liberal policies and you like, more of a socialist style of government, you can create a state government that's like that and run your state that way. Whereas your neighboring state, if they want to be conservative, if they want to, have more conservative values in their legislation, they're allowed to do that without outside interference. And that's why republics work so well. That's why throughout history, does that make sense? Because then you're not going to have conservatives telling lefts what to do. You're not going to have, liberals telling the conservatives what to do, and there won't be that contention.
Yeah, I think the biggest piece with that, two things that I pulled out of that. First is our country and our democracy, to an extent. I use that word very lightly sometimes, but it has become so polarizing that we have exactly what you're talking about with that pendulum. If we look back at previous presidencies, previous governments, we have not always had that situation. We might have had a president that identified as Republican or Democrat, but it wasn't as polarizing or as extreme as we have had in the last 8 years. It has become very much so polarizing, in my opinion, the last 8 years. And I think it started to go down that slope. But if I think back to presidents in my childhood or in my earlier adult years, it was not as polarizing as it is now. And I think there's been so many things in our society that it's really exacerbated that polarization. And it's become even more of a need for us to have those bridging conversations, like you've said. And I'm wondering when, or one of the questions we have a lot with people, and we're actually doing a series on the election. We're starting it next month. and we're running a weekly live where we're talking about the election. We're talking about how you can talk about the election with your family members who might have different opinions, how you can have those conversations, how you can, using your words, build those bridges, right? We're doing a weekly live series where we're talking about that for all the way through inauguration, because this conversation is not going to be done in November when the election happens.
Sure.
This conversation is going to continue all the way through inauguration. January 20th is when the new president gets inducted, but January 21st is going to be a totally different day. And if you look at the last couple inauguration days, it has been a pretty dramatic situation the day after inauguration. So we want to make sure that we're supporting throughout that. But I'm wondering if you have any thoughts of what was it that made us become so polarizing as a country? Do you have any thoughts or ideas on that?
Yeah, so my thoughts and ideas, and again, these are my opinions on this, is it's a problem with the heart. Plain and simple. Like Michael Jackson said, I'm starting with the man in the mirror. And the issue is people have tried to they've made a lot of mistakes as far as how they choose to believe. So for instance, let's talk about equality real quick. Equality of outcome is never going to happen, period. You can legislate all you want, you can beg, borrow, steal all you want. Equality of outcome can never be guaranteed. It's impossible. However, equality of opportunity can be. That's something that can be. And even that is also, it's this weird, I think the issue is this weird idea is that we can create like a homogenous society where all things are always going to be equal and fair. And it doesn't work. It never works because you add the human element to it. So I'll give you a great example. We had this massive spike in the minimum wage, shot through the roof. And it was very liberal policies that were passed. And it shot up like $4 an hour in a matter of just a couple of years. And then there was this little hidden thing in there that says now the state can raise it whenever they want. And they've been doing it like crazy. So that took effect every January 1st every year since 2000. When was it? 2014, I think is when it was passed, 2015. Mm-hmm. And I had one of my best employees come to me and say, hey, Ed, can I talk to you real quick? I was like, yeah, what's up, buddy? And he goes, hey, look, I'm always on time. I never call out sick. I'm one of your hardest workers. I always pitch in and help everybody else with their work too. And, I was wondering if I could talk to you about a raise. And I said, well, I just gave you one. This is in February. And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, January 1st, you got a raise. He goes, well, that was a minimum wage increase. And I said, yeah, it was an increase in your pay. I said, and he goes, well, excuse my language, but he goes, because that's kind of bullshit. He goes, because Josh does half the work I do and he gets paid the same. And I said, and that's why socialism will never work. That's why trying to legislate equality like this will never work. I said, because I would rather pay you $16 an hour, way above minimum wage for the work you do, and pay Josh $2 an hour. Because that's the only the value that he's bringing. And then he goes, well, then why? I said, and I told him, I said, because I'm legislatively forced to pay you guys equally, I can't pay you what you're worth because I have to pay him when he's not earning. And I said, that's why this doesn't work. Legislating equality doesn't work like this. At least legislating equal outcome doesn't work. And then he goes, well, that's bullshit. Why am I working so hard? And I said, again, this is why socialism doesn't work, is because the producers stop losing their incentive to produce, and the people that don't work, they've got no incentive to work harder because they're going to get paid what these guys are going to get paid. And that's kind of a macro idea of it, but you scale that up to where there's this weird belief that if we just make enough legislation and we word the legislation right and then force everybody to follow the legislation, everybody's going to be happy is just a false premise. The only true way to peace and happiness is through personal development. It's through growth. It's through going through trials. It's through working really hard and building the strength on your own. And
so how can we do that we do a lot of that piece, right? Like it's all about our name, us squared, is understand self, unite society. We have to start with ourselves. We have to do that work.
Yes.
And we believe that everyone has the ability and has the power and the responsibility to have their own beliefs, their own thoughts.
Yeah.
But what we fight very vehemently against is no one has the right to impose those beliefs or opinions on anyone else, which is what I believe I hear you saying as well.
Yes.
And that no one's rights supersede anyone else and their rights. So what I mean by that is you can't say something that's going to discriminate against me being able to do what I need to do, right? You can say whatever you need to, but we need to not spew hate towards one another.
Yes.
You don't have to like who I am. You don't have to agree with who I am. We might have very different opinions on a lot of things, but we need to be able to have a conversation without throwing profanities at each other, without saying that someone's a horrible person because of who they voted for or what they believe in. It's about saying, okay, we have a difference of opinion. I'd like to learn why you have that opinion. I'd like the opportunity to share why I have my opinion. And then we can plan to say, okay, I'm still going to keep my opinion, but thanks for sharing yours.
Yeah.
And we just don't have that in today's society as much. And that's something that we've worked on and we're talking about, but so many people hear it and say, you're just trying to change my mind, or you're just trying to make me believe what you want me to believe.
Well, and a lot of people do that. A lot of people, their agenda and the propaganda they put out there is all about trying to force other people to think how they think, or even accept how they think. I don't have to accept how someone thinks and still care for them and love for them.
Exactly.
And I think two of the other biggest things that get in the way is this weird victim competition that's out there. This whole competition to see which group is the biggest victim and therefore they deserve special treatment. And I look at that almost from a father's point of view, where for me as a parent, my idea with my kids was, hey, if you do this, this is going to be your consequence. You're going to hurt yourself. But then the worst parent is the one that goes, no, you can't make that mistake. You can't hurt yourself. I'm never going to let you make your own decisions. Let me make your decisions for you. And that way you never get hurt. Right. Yeah. Well, that kid never learns from their mistakes. They never make mistakes to learn from. They think they're righteous and they've got everything because nothing bad's ever happened to them. Me, I'm like, all right, I love you. I told you there's a brick wall there, but if you're going to run towards it, run towards it. I'll be there to pick you up afterwards and you'll learn your lesson and you'll deal with it. This whole idea that we should be trying to fix everyone's lives and fix everyone's mistakes.
Right. Yeah. I think there's just some pieces of having the conversations that we need to be able to have, right? And I think that's something that both of us can agree on, is that we need to be able to bridge both of those sides and be able to come to more of an idea where we can say, this is my opinion, this is my opinion, not saying that either is invalid, not saying that either is not present or present, but I have experienced this. This is my belief. You have experienced this. This is your belief. And being able to say, thanks for sharing your perspective. And I think that's the biggest thing that we can do as a society is, as we go into this election cycle, whether it's for local government or federal government, listening to different perspectives, voting for the person and not the party, and voting for the issues and not necessarily the party, right? It's about figuring out who are the candidates that are open to us, what are they voting, or what is their platform, and who do you think is the best person for the job? Whatever that position is, whether it's local government or federal, but really looking at the issues, the platform, and who do you want, because every vote counts, who do you want as the person that you're going to vote for? And then once it happens, we are a democracy right now. So whatever happens, whatever decision is made, whatever the public says, we need to be able to support that and say, well, this wasn't the person I voted for, but the people in general, the public, the majority has voted for this, and this is where we're at.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on that. This whole idea that as soon as the opposition gets into office, your job now is to spend the next 4 years trying to tear them down just so you can get your people in office the next time, is wrong. And that goes on both sides. The funny thing is, though, is I truly believe the biggest criminals on the planet right now are the media, because they are so biased in the information that they put out. And genuinely believe that most of America, 90% of Americans, have more in common than they have in opposition of each other. And I believe most Americans tend to sit more in the middle. We don't really feel far right. Very few people are extremely far right. Very few people are extremely far left. But they are the ones that are the loudest, ugliest people and get the most attention. The rest of us who are in the middle, who genuinely just want to live our lives and have, to take advantage of the opportunities that are here and to build our lives and grow our lives and take a vacation and raise our kids and have great holiday family dinners and whatnot. That's what most of us want. And that's the problem with giving government the power that you give them, is you're allowed to take these small viewpoints and then try and force the majority of the population that doesn't agree with that to be that way. And that's where our biggest contention is happening. Again, it's back to, when we say the Pledge of Allegiance, we don't say unto the democracy for which it stands, we say unto the republic. And that was the form of government we were originally created as, that we thrived under. And as we moved from a republic towards a centralized federal government, that's when the issues started to get worse. That's when minority viewpoints were able to inundate themselves in legislation and try and force the states to adhere to minority viewpoints. And that'll never work, because it will always create contention.
Yeah. I appreciate this conversation. Thank you so much, Ed, and good luck in your running. And, I can't wait to hear what happens next, my friend.
I'm excited. And again, thank you. Thank you for having this conversation. Thank you for inviting me on. These are more of the conversations more people need to have. And thank you for being a leader in that, because we need a lot of people to step up and do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking forward to more conversations, sir.
Me too. Have me on anytime.